morning. So I want to focus this morning on the passage from Matthew, and it's an interesting passage, and our temptation always is to jump just to those last couple of verses about those who are feeling weary and come to Jesus and find rest. But actually there's more going on in this passage than just that. That's kind of like the conclusion. But I thought I'd start this morning by thinking about wisdom, and what is wisdom, and where do we find wisdom? Jesus says wisdom is known by its actions. But one of the interesting things in the book of Proverbs, which is the book of wisdom in the Old Testament, wisdom is often portrayed as lady wisdom. So wisdom is seen as female. And one of the just little things that we did when we were in New Zealand back in February was going to the National Museum in Wellington, and we booked in for a tour with a Maori guide. So we walked all the way through this museum with a Maori guide, getting Maori insights into their culture and history and so forth. And it's interesting, one of the things about Maori culture and marriage is that marriage brings together male and female, and the thought is that the female contribution to marriage is wisdom. So all you wives out there, you say, nod your heads and say, yes, that's true. Of course that's true. That it's the woman who brings wisdom. And so one of the things I've been thinking about this week is, where in our day and in our culture do we turn to for wisdom? So I'm going to just unmute everybody just for a moment. You don't all have to speak at once, but where would you go to try and find wisdom? Where or to whom would you go to find wisdom?
I know.
Google.
Google, I heard someone say. But Google, of course, gives us a whole plethora of stuff, and some of it's good, some of it's wise, and some of it's not wise. But yes, turn to Google.
I think in the past we would have asked our parents when they were alive, because we thought of them as having wisdom, some of us.
Yeah, so parents, teachers perhaps.
Yes.
Family history.
Family history, yeah. So how about, so if we think about family history, who are the holders of wisdom in our family history? Is it the grandparents? Is it?
Yes, yeah.
How does that make you feel, all those who are grandparents? That
pretty good.
Challenge.
Ah. Where else might we turn for wisdom?
Peter, our forefathers. Our forefathers.
What, Jan? Our forefathers? Yep.
That is our grandparents. And I'm just something to say. I know someone who had wisdom. Not had wisdom. Norman.
They're asking, where would you go to find wisdom? Yeah. Yeah.
Forefathers.
Yeah, but that's just
No idea.
So, I'll mute everyone again. Thank you for thinking about that question. It just shows you that there are various sources and various places we go to find wisdom. And wisdom, it seems, comes from lived experience. So the types of people we were mentioning, parents and grandparents and forefathers and teachers, These are all people who have lived experience that they can pass on to us. In the midst of coronavirus, some of the people that we're listening to are health experts. Although even that is interesting, that in this particular crisis, the government's prepared to listen to scientific experts, but in other crises that we face, such as climate change, it seems like the government doesn't need to listen to scientific experts. So, yeah, it's interesting. Jesus, of course, said wisdom will be known by her actions. And I suspect in his day, Jesus was not considered by many people to be a really wise person, because he challenged lots of accepted ways of thinking. So he was seen more as a prophet probably than a wise teacher, because surely a wise teacher wouldn't rock the boat as much as Jesus did, wouldn't cause as much controversy as Jesus seemed to do. And yet Jesus says, well, look at what I'm doing. Look at the message I'm bringing, a message of love and grace and forgiveness and mercy, and see how I interact with people, see how I bring healing and wholeness, and draw your own conclusions as to whether these are the actions of a wise person or not. The second point I wanted to just bring to our attention this morning is this idea of being weary and carrying burdens. And many of us will have felt burdened these last few months, burdened by the uncertainty of what's happening around us with coronavirus. And the last couple of weeks may have increased our anxiety, may have increased those feelings of worry, because burdens can be physical, but they can equally well be mental, emotional, or spiritual. So again, I'll just unmute us all briefly. What sort of things are making us feel weary and burdened at the moment?
The uncertainty of everyday life.
Yeah, so that's a big one. Just the uncertainty of knowing how things are going to pan out, and even what we're allowed to do today and tomorrow and next week.
Yeah, the uncertainty of not being able to plan a holiday.
That's right, exactly. I quite agree.
Yeah.
I'd like to go on a holiday, but I can't go on a holiday until my back recovers. And then I don't know if I'll be able to evade the coronaviruses, because I think everything will be shut down anyway. So we'll probably never get away.
I was speaking to someone during the week who has planned a holiday for this time of year in Japan, but they're not going because they said, well, where would we go? There's nowhere to go. We have to stay home, and that doesn't sound like a holiday.
Peter,
Just crashed.
I'm weary. I'm weary because I can't get any sleep, because I sit on a chair and I don't get hardly any sleep because I'm in so much pain.
So that's another reason some of us, yes, are feeling very weary and burdened because of chronic health issues.
Chronic pain, that's right. Exactly.
Which is a huge burden to have to bear.
Mentally and physically, it's affecting me, and Bruce.
So Jack, you're quite right. It's a mental thing as well as a physical
I
thing.
seem to be carrying those so it's out.
Anyway, I've muted everyone again. So yes, there are many reasons why we may be feeling burdened at the moment, and we've just heard some of those. Back in his day, Jesus was quite critical of other religious groups, and especially the Pharisees, for laying what he called heavy burdens on people and then not helping them to carry those burdens. And some of those burdens might be interpretations of the Jewish law that governed every aspect of life. So it governed the food you ate and how you prepared the food. It covered who you could mix with and under what conditions you could mix with them. A bit like us at the moment in terms of, you know, who's allowed to meet with whom. And Jesus, I guess, thought that was a heavy burden to lay on people. So in contrast to that, he says, well, come to me and learn from me, because my way of living, my approach to life is much lighter and easier than some of these rival groups are trying to teach you. And it's interesting then, and this is, I guess, moving on to my third point, that Jesus is not actually offering us a carefree life or a leisure-filled life where there will never be problems or there will never be worries again. No, I think he's much more in the Malcolm Fraser camp, that life wasn't meant to be easy. But he is offering us something, and the invitation is very personal. Jesus says, come to me and I will give you rest. Take my yoke and my burden upon you. So it's very much an invitation to come to Jesus. And at our Exploring Faith group meeting on Thursday, Sue Eastwood was reading to us from the Message translation of this same passage. And it was interesting because it talked about walking with Jesus and working with Jesus as we go through life, which was, I think, very insightful and very helpful. So Jesus is saying to us, well, life can make you weary. Life can be a burden in all of the ways that we were saying just before. But if you will come to me and learn my way of living and my focus on helping others, loving others as we love ourselves, loving God, then you will find a rhythm of life that, while not being totally free from the issues that face all of us, like coronavirus or like chronic health conditions, we can be at peace in our hearts. We can live at peace in our souls. We can know that we are living a good life linked to Jesus, being yoked with him, as this passage describes it. And I think that's an amazing invitation that each of us is offered, and it's something that is not a one-off. It's not something that you say once, but it's an invitation for every day, that we will walk with Jesus through our lives every day. Amen.